7:30 now.
Now it's like 5 till.
I call to order the Oswego Community Unit School District 308 Board of Education meeting. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Baumann,
Here.
Mrs. Doyle,
Here?
Mrs. Kroner,
Here.
Mr. Lightfoot,
Present.
Miss Morgan,
Here.
Mrs. Moyer,
Here.
Mrs. Swanson.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On behalf of the Board of Education, I would like to thank the public for attending tonight's meeting. We value the feedback we receive from our residents and encourage everyone to take an active interest in their public school system. Residents interested in speaking to the board this evening are asked to have completed a comment card and presented it to the secretary to the board. When the secretary calls your name, I ask that you come to the microphone, state your name for the public record, and provide your feedback. Please note that comments are limited to 5 minutes per person and that no discussion of personnel matters or responses to questions are permitted. The board does not participate in discussion during public comment. Follow-up to your questions or concerns will be addressed by administration through the contact information provided on the comment card. Thank you.
Melanie McAllister.
Dear Board of Education, thank you for taking the time to read my comments. I appreciate all your hard work during this difficult school year. We need to return to a normal, full-time, 5-day-a-week schedule of in-person instruction. Due to the shortened school days, my child is getting less speech therapy than he is entitled to under his IEP. And he is not the only child with an IEP not getting the allotted hours for school-related services. This makes me feel upset for my child and all the IEP kids. It's not fair to them at all. I believe for the children's mental health, social skills, and academic learning, the kids need a full day of school. The students could easily eat lunch in the classroom or other school districts in this area have returned to full-time school days with success. Also, we need to have all of the extracurricular activities available as well. Those provide a much-needed outlet for children's physical and mental health. As soon as my child is back on with remote learning in the afternoon or on Wednesdays, his anxiety returns. I see 2 happy children on the days that they receive in-person instruction in the morning, and my 2nd grader is motivated to learn, and my 4th grade child with an IEP is not anxious. Thank you.
Jessica Guardado.
Tonight, I wanted to bring attention to the board about my concerns for the seemingly quick phase transitions we've had as a district recently. Judging by the heavy push to move along these phases, I assume the district will want to move everyone back into in-person school by the end of the year. As a current student at Oswego East, my concerns include whether I will still have the choice to remain remote past phase 2, as well as be able to continue to preserve the safety of my family. I personally think that shoving all students and teachers back into school could be one of the worst decisions the district could make at this time. For me, my parents and close family don't have the vaccine accessible to them at this time. I know others who live with grandparents or young children in their household who also don't have accessibility to the vaccine or choose not to receive it. I don't feel comfortable going into school surrounded by hundreds of other students during this time, some of which I know personally have gotten the coronavirus. In order to preserve the safety of my family, I have been doing remote school from home while still maintaining good grades. I should continue to have that choice to do school remotely during this time as these said phases progress. My question to the board is, as the district gets to make decisions for us students, we are obligated to follow. How is the district going to handle the situation of someone's close family member passing because a student got sick at school and brought it home to their family? How is that situation going to be handled knowing that there was such a fast transitional push to get everyone back in school, and it could have been prevented. For me, I care about the safety of myself and my own family. This is not about what students, teachers, or faculty want. It's about the health and safety of my loved ones and countless others. Item 5.1, board member comments. Anybody want to begin, or should we just go through? Nothing from Ruth, Heather? No? Allie? Brent? Tony?
Yeah. Just want to say that I think we do need to clarify that, we so far, I think, have balanced the needs of people who are at home with people who want to go back to school full-time, and that it continues to be a board priority to balance those things based on facts, based on information, based on clear thinking and, big picture thinking, I think. I know that some people in the community don't think we're doing it well, but that is not something that we can do anything about. So what we have to do is make sure that we continue to, balance all this information and balance the things that we need to do overall as a district. So I just wanted to say that. And then I wanted to say too, that sadly it's come to my attention that some teachers are finding negativity online in such a way that in an already painful environment, they're having to listen to people be hard on them. And in some cases that might be warranted. Maybe somebody made a mistake, maybe somebody did something, but I would urge all the parents out there that listen to board meetings to think about whether you think you're really helping your student, your family, the school district, the teacher, the situation by doing that kind of behavior. Because to me, it's a shame that people act like that in a time when it's already very hard on people that are already very stressed out, trying to do the best they can. And I would hope that if you have a problem, you would do what any decent person would do, which was go talk to the person that you're having the problem with and try to work it out on a personal level instead of doing it online.
Matt?
No, thank you.
I also have nothing to add. Item 5.2, board committee reports. Finance and facilities.
It's all you, Brent.
Thanks, Ruth. All right, so the Finance Facilities Committee met on Thursday of last week. Different day for us, but the reason was that Christy was able to coordinate for 4 government bodies to send representatives for us to have discussions, or a deeper discussion about developer fees. And we were commenting about how it was a year ago to almost the day that Christy had originally sent out the email requesting it, that we were actually finally in the room discussing. And the conversation that we had was very different than what we were planning a year ago. And I think Ruth and I talked after the meeting. I think it was probably one of the best Finance and Facility Committee meetings we've had in quite some time. We were able to get insights and feedback from the other government agencies about how they set their fees, what resources they are using, what type of development they see happening within their areas, and what their priorities are around those developments, right? Aurora has very different goals than the village of Oswego. Kendall County, the unincorporated areas are obviously operate very differently than the village of Oswego. And Plainfield has slightly different goals and initiatives as well. So to surmise that, we got a lot of good information. We provided some historical data. They provided us with some historical data. And we talked for a bit about a concept that I'm going to share with you guys now, which is back in 2001, correct?
Yep.
The school district, our school district, paid for University of Northern Illinois to conduct a study on current rates, land values, these type of things. And we've learned and understand that at least the city of Aurora has in the past used that information for themselves. And we kind of we didn't get a whole lot of feedback immediately, and that's understandable because they were hearing things for the first time. But the concept would be if we, the school district, were to be willing to conduct another study, that we could then share it with these government bodies. Possibly they might be willing to help us defer the cost. And the end value is that we would not have Village A competing against Village B with developers because the fees are different. Rather, we could have a conversation where these entities could have rates and fees established for their property that exists within the 308 district. And I think, and I'll let Ruth comment, but I think that is almost a win-win, right? We as a school district are able to be part of the conversation with these organizations about what their fees are. We're helping to provide real data that is defensible as entities would change or adjust any of the fees that they have available. And it would send a clear message to developers that we do indeed want to work with everybody. We're happy to have development within the school district. We're not anti-development in any way. We just need to be smart about what's being developed and that we understand what's coming and how that impacts us financially. Ruth, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it was very interesting to know that these entities do use those numbers that are 20 years old, and one of them had even said that they use data from, I think, 1996. So I also appreciated the feedback that we received from them, that what they hear from developers is the reason they want to develop in this area is because of the schools. So I know that we as board members tend to hear a lot of negative comments. And they said they hear the exact opposite from people looking to move into the area specifically because we have such great schools. And I agree, it was a great meeting. It was nice that everyone was there and participating and sharing information and providing feedback, and definitely appreciated that there was interest in working together. So that was great.
Yep. So our next steps are, Christy has already initiated reaching out to NIU to see if it's a possibility to do another study and what the cost would be of that. Once we have that information, then we'll be able to move on to the next phase, would be revisiting our thoughts and ideas with these government entities, see if there's any interest in helping us cover some of the costs. And then, of course, the board will have to make the decision on whether or not we're willing to pay for the study. Any questions?
No, but I'll add, I think, Dr. Sparlin, we have begun inviting some of those same individuals to come present to us as a board as well. So
Correct, yeah, Mr. DeSanto will be here on March 15th.
Right. How is that different from the RSP study?
So,
Ally, can you say what RSP stands for? No? Okay.
So
Can you?
I can explain it.
No, the big study that we had
The
done.
demographer study?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the RSP, it's a demography study, so it's based on projected future student enrollment. This study is based on what is the value of land, what's the value of new development, and when a single-family house gets built, how many children is that unit going to potentially send to the district? So apartments, single-family homes, multifamily, townhouse, et cetera. And so that data that's in this report can be used to help establish or update land cash fees and impact fees.
So some of it overlaps.
No.
The RSP predicted how many kids we were gonna get.
Right, but this study tells us how much money we should be expecting to collect
Okay.
in fees.
So Brent, Lori said no questions, but I do have a question, which is, does this combat the issue when we've had development in the past and other villages or towns underbid the fees, and then Oswego can't even compete with that?
Well, that was one of my points, and I think that's the case. Look, as we've all discussed, we can't force a government entity to charge a certain rate or to
Right.
charge at all. But I think, again, if we are collectively speaking with them and trying to get them to understand it is in their advantage to have rates that are similar with their neighbors,
Right?
so that they're not competing against each other. Does that
Yeah,
answer?
I was trying to figure out how it would work to create a better situation for Oswego in particular.
Right, so for example, right now, the city of Aurora does not have impact fees, right? So if a developer is trying to decide between the village of Oswego and Aurora, that might influence their decision. And I think we'd rather have a level playing field.
Yeah, I'd rather have a level playing field. I'm just having a hard time seeing the motivation for Aurora to behave in a different way. That's what's hard for me, is to know,
Maureen, I don't know if you have comments, or Christy as well, but I think having discussions and providing some information is a value to all of these government entities versus them setting fees and not having a legal defensible reason for those fees, and that's what this study
Okay.
could help accomplish.
Okay.
Am I? Okay, thank you.
It makes them make the fees make sense,
Yep.
or helps them make the
Because
fees make sense.
if you're a city or a village or a township, what you don't want to do is you don't want to get sued by a developer who says that your fees are incompatible.
Right,
And if they have the evidence of a recent study by a third party,
There's the motivation.
that's admissible
There's
in
the
court as, we set our fees based on this study,
okay. That makes more sense right there, what you just said. Okay.
versus we set our fees based on a study done in 1996.
Yeah, right.
So just to move forward with our committee reports, thank you for that update. Let's move to teaching and learning.
All right, we had our Teaching and Learning Committee meeting on February 17th, so just last week. The first agenda item for discussion was around the plan that we'll hear tonight, or the presentation that we'll hear tonight around the summer school, some of the summer school planning that's happening. I think it was really great information. I think the committee members definitely had a focus on really thinking about, the kind of expanded summer school opportunities that we're going to be able to offer this summer to combat learning loss that we know has happened with COVID. And I think a lot of our committee members were very interested and focused on ideas on how to make those summer school opportunities as accessible as possible to students and families who really need it. And knowing that that's going to take a community effort. It's not just something that the school district can, pull off on our own. It's going to take partnership, collaboration, and, so that we can really take care of these kids that have struggled, the most during this time. So I thought I think it was a really great meeting. It was really good information. and good participation. We had also talked fairly briefly related around the technology, you know, the Chromebook rollout, where we're at currently, and what, you know, our next steps are and plans are. And, you know, I don't think there were a ton of questions related to that, but Tony, what do you think?
Yeah, I think they were worried about the kids that are vulnerable, and they were voicing those concerns on behalf of many different perspectives and different levels, high school, junior high, elementary school. So it was a good meeting, and they're good folk on that committee.
Thank you. Item 5.3, the superintendent's report.
All right, good evening, board. Tonight I have a few items to share with you. I'd like to start off by congratulating the Bednarsik Science Bowl team on winning the regional championship. The team took first place at the Argonne Regional Championship, which qualifies them to advance to the National Science Bowl in April. So a big congratulations goes out to Amy Trumper and all the students who qualified. I'd also like to congratulate our OHS and OEHS students who have qualified as National Merit Scholarship finalists. District 308 has 6 students who qualified. Those students are Liam Fitzpatrick, Nicholas Alonzo, Autumn Bartel, Kayla Fichtel, Porter Lay, and Paul Ricken. So congratulations to each of those students. Last Wednesday, I had the, yes, congratulations. That's quite the achievement. Last Wednesday, I had the opportunity to attend the OHS OEHS girls crosstown basketball game. It was nice to see the girls take the court again. It was very different experience with our athletes and wearing masks in the small crowd of 50 that are allowed to attend athletic events. OHS won the basketball game, and at halftime, I had the privilege of awarding the Crosstown Trophy to Oswego High School, and that's the trophy that we usually award at the Crosstown football game. And the annual Crosstown Challenge is sponsored by Allied First Bank. Allied provided each school $2,500 per school, as well as $10,000 in scholarships to graduating seniors from both high schools. And over the past 15 years, the bank has given out more than $425,000 in scholarships and donations to students at both high schools. So a big thank you to Ken Bertrand at Allied First Bank for their continued support of our students here in District 308. And finally, tonight I'd like to also acknowledge our February Pride, proudly recognizing individuals demonstrating excellence award winners. We'd like to thank our generous program sponsors, again, Allied First Bank, Chick-fil-A, Huntington Learning Center, and Culver's for their continued support of this program. So the following teachers were selected as Teachers of the Month for the month of February. Karen Jordan from Homestead Elementary, Chris Murgas, Lakewood Creek Elementary, Colleen Prado, Oswego High School, Stan Brown from Plank Junior High, and the following employees were selected as our Employees of the Month. Paige Lee from Hunt Club Elementary and Susan Bliss from Old Post Elementary. So congratulations to all of our February Pride winners, as well as our, the students that I just mentioned earlier. So how about another round of applause for all of our employees? All right, thank you. That is my report for this evening.
All right, item 6, approval of the consent agenda. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve all items under consent, including 6.1 minutes from the Board of Education meeting on February 8th, 2021, open and closed session, and 6.2 to acknowledge the FOIA request received by the district.
Second. Mrs. Moyer,
Aye.
Mr. Lightfoot,
Aye.
Mrs. Croner,
Aye.
Mr. Bauman,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson, Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Ms. Morgan.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Information?
Item 7.1 is in regards to the driver education vehicle bid. Christy?
Yes, thank you. As you know, we received 3 bids with monthly lease payments ranging from $225 to $309. However, after several phone conversations about license plates and the extra brakes being installed, the lowest bidder for the leased vehicles notified me a week ago, last Friday, that after consulting with their finance department, that it was determined that a school district is not eligible for a retail lease. The lease that is available to a school district is a municipal lease, which comes at a greater cost, approximately twice the quoted prices that we received on leases. And the reason for that is the additional liability that comes with leasing to a school district that's using vehicles for driver's education. So at that time, I reached out to the other two dealers, and then after an initial response of yes, I asked them to also check with their finance departments, and they both ultimately returned with the same response, that a municipal lease is our only option. So next, I checked to see if the dealers would honor their quoted purchase prices. Two did reply yes. One submitted a new quote, which was slightly higher than their bid, about by $500. So therefore, at this point, the board does have two options. We can reject all bids and move forward with securing quotes with dealers without another public bid, as Maureen has indicated that we have met the test of due diligence at this point, or to award the bid as a purchase to one of the bidders. However, the municipal lease, will still be less than what we pay now for the rental of these vehicles, but not as much of the savings as we initially projected.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last part?
So the municipal lease is still less than what we currently pay for the, currently we rent the vehicles, the municipal lease would still be less than that.
Okay, in your, I'm sorry, are you done?
Yes.
Okay. In the memo, I'm not seeing the new municipal lease rates, so I could compare that.
Right, so that's, would be the next step, if we reject the bids, to then go work with the dealers on the municipal lease quotes. The only thing I know is they would be about twice as much as, that was their initial quote, about twice as much as what we're paying, what they quoted as far as the retail lease.
So, sorry, so they didn't give you an actual number, they just said about twice as much?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Once they saw it was so much higher, we kind of stopped the process until see which direction we go next.
Do we lease them now?
We rent them. We do pay a daily rental rate.
Daily rental. I guess I'm curious, how did we not know until now that we needed a municipal lease?
The dealers never explained that to us. And as I said, as I called them, their initial response was, yes, we can do that, we can honor that price. But when they went back to talk to their finance people, that's when they went to finalize the lease payment papers, that's when they learned that a municipal lease was the only thing available.
Okay, so two questions, and then I'll let someone else talk. A, what is our timing? Like, when do we have to make a decision?
I would bring the recommendation if we move to reject it at the March 15th.
Okay.
Is it the March 15th meeting? Yes.
Okay, so I don't know what others feel. I really feel strongly against an outright purchase.
Okay.
And ownership of an asset that depreciates rather quickly. And I would point to the way that we operate within the district. There's a reason why we lease buses and not purchase them.
Yep.
And given the wear and tear on this type of a vehicle, I think the last thing we want is an asset that's owned that we can't necessarily predict future costs. I get it. Long term, it may be less, but it might not be by the time we're paying insurance and repairs and all those types of things.
Right. So if we did move forward with rejecting the bids at the next meeting, as I said, we would not have to go out for a public bid again. I can just individually work with dealers, get quotes, and bring those to the board on a municipal lease.
What was the savings that you told us last time at the board meeting for the, I don't think it was a lot of money. It seemed like it was $50,000 or something?
It was $33,000
Okay, so $33,000.
annually.
So if we do this municipal lease, we probably won't save $33,000. We'll just be back to where we were. Will we be spending more?
We'd probably save, I'm guessing, around $15,000,
Okay,
because it still is very expensive to rent the vehicles.
okay.
May I ask, would this be a reason that perhaps other dealers had chosen not to bid, is because they knew that we couldn't do a retail lease? And if we rebid with a municipal lease, might we get a wider range of interest that could benefit us? Is that
Well,
likely, unlikely? What are your thoughts?
my thoughts are, I wish somebody would have bid with the municipal lease, because then we would have called them and asked them why the price was so much higher than the others, and we would have learned earlier. But I also think that I would specifically contact dealers and potentially get more quotes, because I'm personally contacting them for. So I think if we just went down 34 here and looked at all the dealers and asked all of them, I think we might get more prices, quite honestly.
I'm with Brent in that I would not at this time be in favor of purchasing, because again, then in 4 years, we're back to needing to purchase again, and it seems like maintenance and all those unknowns are not something we want to get involved in right now. And it's not like an asset that we're going to sell. Who buys a used student driver vehicle? I don't even know if there's even a market for that. It seems like, who would buy that? I don't know.
Well, we could take the extra brake out, so that would be okay.
I know. Well,
I don't know. That might be a selling
As a
feature.
That might
I
be
don't
a
know.
selling point.
parent who has now 2 more drivers in my house, that extra brake maybe would have come in. My kids might not have thought it was so handy, but I would have liked it a time or two.
There may be some spouses that also would find that harmful to the status of the relationship.
Right.
Okay, so what you're basically asking us for here, just make sure I understand completely, is that we move forward, nothing to do for us to do tonight?
Right.
Okay.
So we'll bring it back March 15th to reject the bids, and then I'll start contacting dealers the next day.
May I ask, when do our rentals run out on our current driver's ed vehicles? And are we reaching a point where we may find a delay in offering that service and class because of this?
No, we just continue, they just kind of, until we turn them in, we're just.
Okay, so it's not, it doesn't have an end date.
Open-ended.
But it sounds like the sooner we get this taken care of,
sure.
then the sooner we can stop paying that daily rental and,
That is correct.
okay.
So can we move it to action for tonight to just reject the bid?
No?
No, can we do it action on the 1st?
We can discuss that, but it'll be that timing issue again with then putting it out in the same month as getting them in
Right.
because of the same sort of thing. So it may be that it is preferable to do that for April altogether. It's, at this moment, I don't know that I have a recommendation on that yet. Christie?
The only thing I know is that when I asked about honoring the purchase price, they would honor that till March 15th. But that's obviously not the way we want to go, so I would say if we start looking at them and getting quotes in March with an April delivery, I think then they can work, I think that would work fine.
Okie dokie, thank you very much.
All right, item 7.2 is to have a conversation with the board on the idea of offering summer school to expand opportunities for our students this summer. Faith?
Thank you. So we have received an additional $495,000 of Title I money. This has just come in the last 6 weeks and has very strict guidelines about how it can be used. It needs to be used prior to September 1st. It cannot be carried over into the next school year. Usually Title I money travels just with the schools that are Title I schools. We wrote into the state and got special accommodations to be able to expand this to all of our schools as long as we are identifying students that are struggling either in math, reading, or social emotional learning and want to use this money to provide support into the summer. What we're wanting the board to know is that we have this money, we plan to use this, and then to start committees to decide the length of the program, the length of the day, materials needed, all of those pieces. I was going to talk to you about two things from Springfield that could impact this. One of them became a certainty at 6:21 this afternoon, right before the board meeting. So one of the things that we want to look at is how to identify these students, and we were considering using some of our own district assessment to be able to do that. But we're really trying to balance out the amount of time we're spending on assessment and instruction. And we were hoping that the state of Illinois, along with many other states, would be successful in having the federal government allow for state waivers for this. We heard from our state superintendent at 6:20 this afternoon that will not be a possibility. All assessments will still happen, but there will be a waiver for accountability. So you may know that we have to have 95% of our students participate, or you get a poor summative designation. So what the state superintendent email said, we are going to be giving all state assessments, but they won't have summative designations or attendance requirements. So we will probably very much want to limit the amount of additional assessments that we are doing to try to identify for summer school, and we will be putting together a committee very shortly to work on existing data and other pieces to do that. One of the other things that we do not have certain information from Springfield yet is there are rumors that there could be a mandatory summer school that is imposed upon us. Nothing in writing, that's just rumors, but we have been working with other large unit districts across Illinois to show how each of us are creating our own summer school opportunities and would like that to remain in local control, where we could decide what is the best interest for our students. So that could upset our plans here a little bit, but we like to move forward and start utilizing that money to the best of our ability to recoup some of the schooling loss that our students have had.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
So are we thinking about obviously doing this on-site?
Yes, when we met, we were also thinking about that we could have a remote learning possibility too, but yes, the majority of this would be in person.
Can I ask a clarifying question about state assessments? So can I clarify that the reason that they are not, I can't remember what you called it, said there's no
Waiver?
I understood that part.
Requirement of percentage of people that take the test?
Right, the requirement for participation. They're not penalizing us. Sorry.
Correct.
Because these have to be taken in person, correct? So there's no opportunity for students who are continuing to stay in remote learning to even take this assessment. With that being said, will parents have the opportunity to opt their student out if they are in person?
We haven't heard what the new guidelines around that would be. Our state superintendent was just alerting to that at 6:20. Currently, in the past, there was that opportunity for parents.
Well, or students. From what I remember, parents couldn't opt out their kids. In fact, students have to choose to opt themselves out.
Yes.
That one I know well.
So stay tuned for what that could look like this year.
Terrific.
Is there an option for parents to opt their students in for assessment days should they want their child to be assessed and they're fully remote?
We haven't heard about that yet, but I would guess that that would be an opportunity.
Thank you for the update.
Sure.
All right, item 7.3 is an informational item to begin conversations on what our Phase 3 learning plan may look like. Faith?
Right. Thank you. Tonight we're going to talk about what Phase 3 could look like for hybrid and in person. And this is only a proposal. We will not be making a decision this evening. We plan to bring back a plan for final approval on March 1st. And again, these plans would be things that would begin right after spring break, with the first day being April 7th. Some of the information I'm going to talk about tonight, just a review of our priorities for learning options so far, go over the percentage of students currently in hybrid versus remote by choice, pros and cons of several different plans, and then as well as our administrative recommendations. Before we begin, you're going to have to excuse my soapbox for just a little bit about systems. I believe a lot of what we do is looking around on the demands of government, whether it's local for school boards, even at the national level. There's 3 things that we want from systems, and really only 2 are possible, and different demands and situations require different things. You want a system to be stable and not changing wildly. You want it to be open to stakeholders in different groups, and you want it to be fast. In education, we tend to hover around in stable and open. We take a lot of committees. We don't change quickly. That's how education generally runs. Pandemic came in and said, fast. Now we need to do that. And then you saw, as we moved to fast, we sometimes gave up open. We sometimes gave up stable. And we have to, I think, address as a district which of those 2 are our biggest critical needs of our system right now. So some of the priorities, this is the slide that's been in here many, many times as I've talked with everyone about our current plans. This is just looking at health risks, maximizing the time for in-person instruction, making sure our families and students still have some choice, minimizing this disruption to current teacher-student relationships, and then maintaining students' ability to continue in their courses. These are the percentage of students that are currently in hybrid instruction. If you look at elementary, from phase 1, we had 61%. That grew to 66% during phase 2. Junior high stayed exactly the same at 61%. And high school had 63% in hybrid phase 1 and then decreased to 55%. I'd now like to talk about junior high and high school. And in both the plans, they're very similar between Plan A and Plan B. So Plan A is you took Group A, that's currently coming in 2 days, and Group B in 2 days, and combining them. So they would be coming Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. They'd follow the same Phase 2 bell schedule. Wednesday would remain a remote learning day, and then we would have student support time on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So that's Plan A. The group's coming together for 4 days. Plan B is keeping cohorts of Group A and Group B, but extending the day so that we have longer periods, having lunch at school. Wednesday would still be a remote learning day, and then we would still have student support time. So some of the pros and cons, and the people that generated this list were our committees of teachers and administrators. Pros, the students would stay masked the entire time, and students could come in person more days of the week. That, again, is the combining of the groups. Some of the cons is there'd be a lack of social distancing among students, and we'd have to scan and manage a lot more students as they came into the building and into the hallways. Currently, if you took Groups A and Group B and combined them, we would have 199 classes at OHS that would have more than 18 students in them. And when you look at the square footage of our classrooms and being able to do 6-foot distancing, 18 is around the average of what we'd be able to do that. So we'd have 199 classes at OHS that would be higher than that, and 115 at East. So then look at Plan B, and again, that is making the days longer. Some of the pros is it still allows for social distancing, better management of entry and exit, and then we'd have longer class periods for instruction, and especially our lab classes. The cons, we'd have removal of masks for lunches, and we would need to create spaces for lunches and would have to move some of our classes to other locations. We compared the instructional minutes between these two plans. So the first column is the increase in overall minutes per class per week. The second column is the increase in remote by choice minutes. And the third column is the increase in in-person. So with Plan A, you don't get any additional instructional minutes, but you move a lot more of the minutes for in-person for those students that are choosing hybrid, 66 to be exact. Plan B If you lengthen the day, you get 48 minutes more per class per week of instructional minutes. That's also 48 minutes for remote by choice. It's only 24 additional minutes from what we have now from in-person. I'll now go over junior high. And again, very, very similar, where Plan A is combining the groups where they come in 4 days a week. And then Plan B would be keeping them a much longer time, 4 full days, and students eating lunch while at school. So again, the pros for Plan A, keeping student support time, more students in the building for social emotional learning. Some of the cons would be much less 6-foot social distancing, and could be harder to give equal time to our Group C students that are home for remote. We did the same calculations here. Our junior high classes are a little bit smaller, that 17 students is around the average size where we could keep 6-foot social distancing. You can see at the different junior highs here. And I want to emphasize this isn't because our classroom spaces or square footage is different, but we have very different percentages of students at each of our junior highs that are wanting to come in for in-person. So at Thompson, you'd only have 54, but at Murphy, you'd have 162 classes. Whoops. So then the longer day, some of the pros, 6-foot distancing, lunch at a normal time. Some of the cons, we would see our students only 2 days in person. There would be not enough spaces for lunches, and we would have to get creative on how we would utilize our staff and spread them out for lunch. The instructional minutes, similar to that at the high school, Plan A does not buy you any overall instructional improvement in minutes for instruction, but it slides 60 minutes per class to in-person. Plan B gets you 44 additional minutes per class per week, and the same for remote by choice, but it only slides 22 more minutes per class per week for in-person. So our recommendation would be to move to Plan B for both high school and junior high, to have the longer days, including lunch, while still maintaining the student A cohort and the student B cohort. This would allow for the social distancing piece, but it would buy back many instructional minutes for all of our students. So along with general education, we have to consider special education, and the changes that we would make there would also cause increases for our special education students. So all the STARS, LSP, DHH, and all those pieces, they would expand their day, just like the other junior high and high schools, to match the longer general education days. And then all of our resource and co-taught and 504 students, they would follow the same as their gen ed peers and would have expanded time as well. Watching the group, it looks like keep going. All right.
I just had one quick question, sorry. I just wanted to clarify that the numbers that you're using to calculate for any class sizes at the high school level that would be over 18 students in a class and junior high is 17, those are based on the current selection.
Correct.
Okay, and obviously, what else could you use that for? But parents will have an opportunity to select if they want to move
Yes.
out of remote or into.
Right, and that could
Cover that.
change the numbers.
Right.
One way or the other.
Right.
Those were just samples of what it would look like now.
Right.
Thank you.
And the reason that those are different at junior high and high school from what our elementary at the 20 is because
Our elementary class sizes are actually bigger than junior high and high school by square footage.
the classrooms themselves.
Correct.
So I do have a question. What about for the high school, if we're only at 55%, what about, so I know that A was combining A and B together.
Correct.
What was the thought behind not combining A and B and having the longer day? Besides lunch?
The lunch pieces of what that would look like, that we were already concerned about how to put the lunch piece in and have all that happen, and then to double that would be the reason why. So
Are
we looked at either or.
Did we, I'm just spitballing, but did we consider maybe using one of the gyms or the
So you
or
can
the
only have
auditorium or
right.
the?
You can only put 50 people in a room, even if it's a very, very large room, without a floor-to-ceiling divider.
Right, I'm just wondering because if we're at 55%, that's pretty close to, I mean, it gets us pretty close to where we need to be. And if the kids aren't dressing for gym, that gives us a little bit more space there, which I realize, at least at OHS, is a much longer walk. Here, the gyms are not as far, maybe, as they are at OHS.
And we have PE through gym classes, through lunch classes too, so you still have spaces that you have to.
Right, I mean, I
Is there
I'm just
any
look-
particular concern with having lunch in the classroom space where students are currently having study hall at junior high and high school?
We're not looking at utilizing regular classrooms to do the lunch pieces. It would be bigger classrooms or classrooms that are not used right before or right after so that we could space out, have desks, and do cleaning areas. Okay.
So, just so I can really understand, because I still, I'm a little bit more in the elementary world, but so I can better understand secondary. This recommendation to do Plan B, that would mean that the Group C students, is this right? That the Group C students are live streaming much longer in a day, during the day, than they currently are. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
So with each of these plans, the remote students are following along with what the day would be like for the in-person students. So it does
Right.
become longer class periods and a longer time for class, whether it's in-person or remote.
And so just, I think it's we're tasked with a really hard really hard job to find options that work for each group of students. But I have been hearing concerns that it has been very challenging for many of our secondary students who are fully remote to stay engaged with the live streaming component. And, obviously things take time to get, things take time to get used to. So that's certainly a concern that I've heard, that even, the kids that had been remote, for so long, teachers are kind of losing, and we're successful. Those that have stayed remote and are trying to work through the live streaming piece, they're losing them. So obviously these were still early days, but that is a concern. That's just a concern that I have. Is that something that you heard from your committee?
Right. It is a new way of teaching for our secondary teachers, that they have students in front of them and they have students via computer. And there's an adjustment to be made there as you're regarding questions and monitoring the chat, or having a student that helps monitor the chat, making sure that your visuals are great for the students in front of you, plus at home. And it is an adjustment. And I think these first couple of days, there's definitely been struggles. I'm optimistic that it is going to improve as students and teachers become more comfortable with this style of instruction.
And I wonder, we wouldn't know until it happens, but it would be interesting to me to see if we have a jump up from that 53% with another option presented. If families are realizing this is not working as well as we had hoped, or not. So it's just an interesting thing to consider and wait and see.
We had quite a
There's
few
really no
parents-
way to know.
No, yeah.
Or even guess, because it's not like we have any data to refer back to as.
Right. It's really just an anecdotal,
Yeah.
kind of idea to think of. Yeah.
Heather brought up the point of more screen time. We're currently have moved to the 5-hour day schedule for secondary students. So how much less screen time are they having with the 5-hour than they were in the phase 1 Like, how does that phase one, I guess, screen time then compare with this phase?
There was a bigger break with the very first phase that you had time, and then you had, a pretty significant break. The time of the actual minutes isn't that different, but we don't have the large break. It is, get through your
Right, and
time.
now, but at the beginning of the school year, the first half of the school year, everybody was remote
Correct.
the whole time, and that was a full school day? Right?
No.
Sorry.
It was chunked. I know, I can't
It was-
remember either.
It was still, the smaller pieces and what those look like, and we had the Wednesday that was completely on a break. So,
That was Xbox Day.
so different amounts of time, and it depends on the student's schedule too, whether you had a study hall, a break, lunch, all of those pieces, and other students, don't, and they're going more back to back on what that looks like. So there would be more screen time, but you also would have longer breaks with this time because your lunch would not be just the 30 minutes. It would now be 44 minutes. If
Right.
you had a study hall, it's now a much longer break than what it was.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. I thought you had a question.
No, go ahead.
So I know this was brought up a little bit earlier. As we go from A to B to C, or 1 to 2 to 3, and I guess this might be a question maybe for somebody else, what's our data for going to phase 3? Like as a state, as a district, as a,
Yeah, that would be my question as well. You have a date listed of April 7th. What criteria are you looking at to see what happens if we come back from spring break and all of a sudden we have another spike in things? What is the criteria for being able to move into a phase 3?
So right now, we're looking more at what the school numbers are and what the impact of that is, and you can visit the dashboard. Our community can look at that, and it's really looking at how much PPE we have on hand, whether we have enough staff to do that, and whether we see that there's a spread or a suspicion that it's happening at school. Then you could do a break or a pause, and it could be for a classroom, it could be for a school. I think it would be doubtful as it was for the whole district, but it could happen. So it's not as much based on the surrounding community, it's what's happening within the school walls.
I don't disagree with that approach, Faith, but I want to know, how does that get reported back to the board then as far as what's going on at each school?
So there is a district dashboard where we are listing the schools and looking at each week. The administrators go through, and there's a large criteria that they're reporting out on how social distancing is being followed, what the rates look like. Teresa's doing a really good job of providing all of those stats, and we're keeping a close eye on all of that.
Okay, because I've expressed my concern that people aren't being notified about positive cases in the building. And I think that is a common concern for teachers and other staff members to know if there's somebody in the building that they're dealing with. And I know that you guys have reassured the board members that that's being communicated to the people who've been exposed to those folks. But I just want to say, at this meeting, that I think it's really important to have those cases accountable, where we're accountable for people that are positive and that we're making some effort to document that.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Elementary. All right. Wanted to talk through two approaches that we didn't bring to the committee, just because I'm receiving a lot of questions and things from the community of why can't we do this. So one of the pieces is, what if we had, similar to the junior high and the high school, that the teachers simultaneously taught their first graders here that are in person and their first graders remote. And that's one of the things that I'll talk about. And then the other that keeps coming up is, couldn't we switch and have some teachers teach all the kids that are in person and have other teachers teach those students that want remote? So we feel strongly that, especially for our youngest learners, to be taught remotely and in person at the same time, that is not in the best interest of developing early literacy and early numeracy skills for either set of students. Our teachers are great. They're trying so hard, but to simultaneously manage a class of young students and teach them, we think is an unreasonable burden. Then you don't have to pay attention too much to this very busy slide because I summarize it in the next. But what this is just going through and looking for our first grade classes at all of our schools. If we looked at phase 2 of the students that have said that they want to be in remote and in person, separated them out, gave them to teachers that only taught remote, teachers that only did in person, how many students would be moved, how many new teachers we would need, what our class sizes would look like. So again, this is a first grade example. We would have to move 440 students to different teachers. And to make that happen, we would need to hire 5 new teachers because we would be above our current class caps. And we would then move to having 18 classes over 20 students. And that's just for first grade. So if you wanted a ballpark of what this would look like for elementary, multiply all those numbers by 6 for kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth grade. So we did talk through 3 plans. Plan A with continuing the phase 2 schedule with no changes. Plan B, we've heard from quite a few teachers that they would like to switch Wednesday and have that time be in the morning instead of the afternoon. Or Plan C, using the phase 2 schedule but change Wednesdays to in-person and having our remote students live stream into the classroom. So with Plan A, some of the things that were listed as pros, it's a consistent schedule for all. It allows our special education self-contained classrooms to blend into general education on Wednesday. Daycare and busing would remain the same for families. The cons, the large one would be no increase in time for in-person instruction. Looking at Plan B, and again, that's just flipping the combined in-person and remote time that is now at Wednesday afternoon to the mornings. The pros would be you would get 10 more minutes of core instruction on Wednesday. Some of the cons, it would be a change in schedules for all the stakeholders, and it would affect daycare for families. Plan C would be, pros would be increased time for in-person instruction. Some of the cons would be, it would be a change in schedules for all of the stakeholders. It would also require our elementary staff to learn the art of teaching in person and live streaming all at the same time for 1 day a week. So our recommendation for elementary is no additional change. And the reason that we go back to, if you think back to the very beginning about what do we need from a system, we're thinking that stability is very much needed at the elementary level right now. So if that would be the case, then our special education classes would also have no change. That would be the same for our resource and our 504 plans. We also went through and talked about early childhood and what the different plans could be there, where Plan A, we could just continue with the phase 2 schedule. Plan B is you could add in-person instruction on Wednesdays, and following that. The pros and the cons of Plan A would be less change and being able to have that consistency that we've talked about. Plan B, some of the pros would be increased student contact time. Be very, very tough on staff that they would be very, very reduced to much less support time that they already have, and then we do feel that parents would not want yet another change so quickly. So our recommendation for early childhood is also no change. Very briefly, I'd like to talk about some of the other special education programs. For pathways, we did talk through 3 plans. Plan B would be the choice that we went with, where we continue with our current schedule but add community-based instruction on Wednesdays in the morning. And the pros and cons are listed there, but I know we want to get to questions and those types of things, so I will go rather quickly through this. For EVA, also, we wanted to go with Plan B. This is an increase in-person, especially at the junior high level. not much change at elementary, and we already had expanded time for high school there. Just talking through the different plans, again, we went with Plan B. Goal, we want to, on Wednesdays, add another in-person day from 7:40 to 12:40, so that would be an increase for them. And then finally, what kind of a timeline are we looking at? If this is approved, or what plans are approved on March 1st, then we would have staff communication on the 3rd, parent communication out on the 4th, new parent choice due by March 10th to make all of the arrangements that need to be made so that we could get this going immediately after spring break. Questions?
Who would like to begin? Or are there no questions?
Just a point of clarification, I did notice we were using a factor of 18 at high school and a factor of 17 at the junior high school, but yet we've been having discussion after discussion about 20. And then I will tie that back to, and I know those are specific individual classes that you highlighted in the table, yet when I have visited schools and when I ran into some teachers over the weekend, I'm hearing about 5 and 6 kids in the classroom with half attendance. So quick math, that's 12. So I guess I'm curious about the delta between some of the things we're seeing and what you're reporting back out on.
Sure, and there are some classrooms across the district that only have 12 students coming in person. Absolutely. We have one class at Boulder Hill that has 21 of their students all in remote. So it is very different as you go across the district, where you have some schools that tend to have a lot more students in person than they do remote. It's even different sometimes by the same teachers at the same school within a grade level, that at a particular second grade class, they have a lot more students that are in remote by choice. The other two have more that are in person. So it's very different. It is not spread, the math is not the same as you go from school to school.
And again, the 17, 18, 20 related to the square footage.
Correct.
So I do have a quick question, actually, that Brent's to tagline off that one, which is specifically at the junior high and high school level, which is really what I think Brent was referring to there. When we're calculating those numbers of 17 and 18 in a classroom, were you just thinking traditional general education classes like a language arts or a math class, or did that also take into account classes like band or choir or physical education where there's significantly higher number of students anyway?
Those are all the classes. So there is some band that's in there. There is some choir that's in there. Yes.
Okay.
Those are all.
Because
the
obviously
classes.
a band room can fit a lot more than
Correct.
17, 18 kids. And all I know, I can't speak for OE, but I'm assuming they have a pretty large program as well that they would.
Correct.
So they have large rooms where you could obviously fit a lot more than.
Right. Some of our classrooms and some of our class rosters are very different depending on the subject that we're talking about.
How many classrooms do we have total at the junior high, high school levels? Do you happen to have that figure? And if you don't, it's
I
okay.
don't know how many classrooms, but it would also be the amount of classrooms times 7. Like a lot of our classrooms are used 7 or 8 times in a day. So I have to come back on the math.
That makes sense.
I have one more question, sorry.
No.
And this refers to the eating of the lunch, the dreaded eating of the lunch at school. What is the idea of what lunch is going to look like? Because normally you go into the cafeteria and you walk down the line and you get the school food. Now my kids are grabbing a bag on their way out the door that's filled with all kinds of goodies.
Right.
I had a corn dog today.
I will not tell you the interesting things we had today, but Matthew got mini pancakes and he was very excited.
That was last week for us.
But if it's going to be a bag lunch type thing, and they're already assigned to a study hall room for lunch now that we assume would have social distancing, thus the assigning of the room. I too am wondering why that wouldn't potentially be an option unless those classrooms are more full and they can't do the distancing.
Right, so, and each school could be very different. Trauber is one of the places where it will be the most tricky, perhaps, to figure that out, and how many students are needing to eat lunch at the same time. As you all know, it's not just everybody has lunch, it staggers. So whatever spaces you have also need to be washed and cleaned before the next group of students comes in to be able to utilize that same space. I know one of the things that they're talking about at the high school, if we had 50 desks that are out there that students are eating at, you might use 100 and have rows 1, 3, 5, and 7 be the first lunch, 2, 4, 6, 8 be the next lunch, and then go back and clean, so there would be more time to do that. It's not going to be what we think of a lunch where everything is open and there's all the regular options for lunch. There would be very limited selection that students would make a choice from, and they would need to pick up, and then not everybody would be able to eat where food is being distributed. You'd have to travel to a different location or a different classroom. It's possible that we might even utilize, some open spaces for lunch. By the time that, April comes around, maybe there would even be some things that we could utilize as outdoor eating areas to help with those pieces.
That would be great. We haven't used our outdoor spaces at the high schools as much as we could have.
I know up to this point, we've had concerns about staff wanting to supervise lunch. One of the things that is making this more possible now, in my opinion, is we'll have a lot of our staff that have chosen to become vaccinated and would be able to supervise lunch, hopefully with more peace of mind than they would have had if we had done this a month ago.
I have a question for Dr. Sparlin on that. When will you know when the majority of the teachers have gotten their second vaccination?
February 28th, this Sunday, is the second of this 26th and the 28th. So any teachers that took advantage of that opportunity will have been vaccinated, which is over 2,000.
Okay, out of how many?
Employee-wise, we have around 2,400 employees, but anyone who was, everyone was provided the opportunity. So if they took
Right,
advantage
I just
of it,
wanted
right?
to know
Yeah.
when we were hitting the point where we had the assurance that it was most of the employees.
That would be this Sunday, yep.
So I have a question.
Can I put a quick plug in? I think that they're also looking for volunteers for this Sunday, as there will be 2,000 some second doses. So if you would like to volunteer, I'm sure there's a sign up you can join that Teresa's saying, yes, there is a sign up that you can sign up for if you'd like to help it that way.
Teresa, is there any plug for that right now or no?
Sorry, Helen.
No, that's good.
Yes, there is a spreadsheet. I'm happy to share it with all of you.
So I have a question. We know that we have certainly been getting a lot of questions about, okay, so what's the next phase? And now what's the next phase? And now how do we get kids in more? And what else can we do? All really reasonable, realistic questions. There's also questions from teachers and families and a lot of people that are asking, why are we already thinking about phase 3 when we barely got started with what our current plan is? And I'm interested in hearing about that. I'm concerned about our timeline, because this is, to me, now our timeline, this is the fast, in terms of a systems thing in my mind. And I understand why. I understand we need the lead time. I understand we need to inform people, and we need the planning time to make this move. But this, for a lot of people, and teachers and families included, I think they don't feel that they have enough information to make some solid decisions about phase 3. So
I'm certainly getting mixed emails, I'm sure, as you all are, of you're not moving fast enough. You're moving way too fast.
Too fast, yep.
You're not doing enough in person. You're doing way too much in person, and you're throwing social distance. I think that, we've seen that our community is in very different places on this really important decision. When you think about why moving fast, it certainly was difficult to start talking about phase 3 when we were still in phase 1 with staff. Some pushback of like, Faith, you want us to think about how to do phase 3 and we haven't even, and yet in order to get phase 3 going and still have it be worthwhile moving to, because even when we come back after spring break, that's about 7 weeks left of school. So yes, we've made schools all over the country learn how to be a little fast. And that's growing pains. That's something that we're not used to, but yet there was a necessity to continue to react to new information, knowing that our staff is now going to be vaccinated, knowing that we have those different pieces that allows for more. I don't think for elementary there's much left to build, but there was for junior high and high school.
Right.
So it's difficult, very difficult on our parents and our students. It's been difficult on staff to make these many changes as well. And yet we're wanting to continue to make improvements, which then cause us to change. So that's a long-winded answer without much direction. I apologize for that, but it's more of admiring the problem of what we've been trying to do.
Well, the fact that we come back right, and we only have 7 weeks left before school ends, kind of just leads me more into, I would like to see both A and B on the longer schedule, especially at the high school. You're going to lose a lot of seniors after week, 5? So granted, that's, 4 weeks of a bunch of kids being in the building, but if you put this out to parents who don't want their kids in classes of, say, 20, my biggest class right now is 20, my smallest class is 14. So we still do labs, we still do, we wash our hands all the time. Everybody stays as, far apart as you can, and it's probably not always 6 feet. Kids congregate, that's just what they do. But I mean, if I have any voice in it at all, it would be for the longer day for both.
Right now, that's not, and not to say that it's not possible, but that's not what we have, that's
Right.
none of the plans, right? Right, like for both groups for long days. And I, for one, really want to see the secondary level be able to maintain social distancing amongst students as best we can. Before everybody out there jumps all over me, we all know there's going to be classes that we might not be able to do that. That's not going to happen for. But as best we can plan for, and as best we can support, that's what I think is one of the things that I think is really important.
And I want to say that I think that the board is taking into consideration much more carefully this time, looking at this plan, what it entails, and I just appreciate that, because I think that was a very important piece where it's easy for us to second guess, it's easy for us to say, this is what we want, even though it's unreasonable, rearrange this, rearrange that, and I think now we're starting to realize, like, there's a price to be paid, depending on what our choices are, and we're being more seasoned and reasoned in what we're looking at. And, I'm not going to say which option I think is best, but I think that all of us are considering what's going to happen based on what we choose. And I just want to say to Faith, do you think that these options that are there, I mean, Plan A is in place, but Plan B and Plan C, is that a timeline that involves you doing a good job of those? Because a lot of people, that's their criticism, is you need to be able to do it well.
And are you talking for elementary, for Plan A, B, and C?
For junior high and high school too.
Well, anytime that you start something new, there's an adjustment period on what that looks like. I think with elementary, we're already very close to being maxed out of what the instructional time would be. And I don't think, moving to Plan C at elementary, which would buy you one more half day of in-person, but having the teachers figure out how to manage their class, set up the technology, and do in-person for 1 day a week, I don't see staff becoming great at that. And that isn't because our staff wouldn't try and they wouldn't do all those pieces. Just to teach and invest that much time for a half day of instruction once a week is an extra big
No, I
burden
see that very
for the
much,
piece
that
for
that is not a great
elementary.
idea, yeah.
At junior high, having the expanded periods and that longer time to do some of our classes, especially with science labs and those things, when you're recouping 13, 14 minutes a day of more instructional time, I think that's already how teachers had been teaching. Before it's a new twist to be able to get everything done in 30 minutes. So to be able to bring it back and to have the longer period of time. And some of the subjects adjust to the shorter time frame better than others. But if you look at setting up science labs, that's difficult in 30 minutes.
Okay.
But in all fairness, from a science teacher, it can be done, and it can be done really, 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 really well. It just requires more work from the teacher, which, listen, I have worked harder this year than I have in 20 years of teaching. But, you know what, in 11 more weeks, I'm going to get a 12-week break, right? So I know we're asking a lot. I know we are, but you gotta keep going.
So I just have a couple questions. Brent, did you have anything else that you wanted to ask about? I think that was, we've heard from everybody. Okay.
No, I'll just
Yeah.
make a comment. I think most people know where I am. I want us to be open, and I want us to be 5 days a week, and I want us to be in classrooms. And, when I talk to teachers, there's some level of frustration that for some kids, this was a lost year. And that motivates me for those that feel like, well, there's only X weeks left. I say, but we haven't had full-time instruction for a year. And I'd like to get us closer to it. Thanks.
So my only questions, I'm going to be very simple and very big picture. You talked at the beginning about systems that we have to balance between stable, open, and fast. Is this the best we can do in the systems that we currently have in place in our school district now? Are your recommendations what you believe would be best for the students to provide that balance between more instructional time and still creating safety?
Yes.
I guess that's really the only question that I have. No, I remember the other one. Ready? You're not thinking of a phase 4 this year, are you?
No, I would really like us to be able to say, okay, we are here and this is what we need to do, and get down to doing this really, really well. And have my team and the teachers and all those also start building on all the things that need to be done to support our students next year. There is so much work to be done to look at what are the essential standards. How do we build interventions at the beginning of next year to recoup some of this? How are we going to identify our students for gifted in this unusual time? How are we going to make our staffing projections when our kindergarten numbers are quite low? And what does that look like? How are we going to adjust assessment? There is so much that needs to be done in order to really work on preparing for our students the next time around. I believe that we will have gotten to a max amount of instruction with social distancing. If you're willing to put aside more social distancing, you can get more in-person time. But these plans really come very close to the instructional minutes that we would deliver at junior high and high school during a regular year, but it is remote and the hybrid approach. So while we're making one more change, I would suggest then we work at being stable for the remainder of the year, and supporting students and staff get used to the last of these changes, get as good as we can about catching everybody up, both in academics and social emotional, and continue to put our sights on this year. But February is always the year in my position that I start living in 2 school years. You're trying to live out this year, and you're spending all of your time trying to prepare for next year. And that needs adequate planning and time too.
And just to ask about next year, will there be, I assume there will be a plan that next year you could choose to go all remote, and there would be some dedicated staff for that, and then there would be all in person, as best we can tell, for next year?
It remains to be seen what next year would need to look like, but a remote option would, if we move forward, would most likely be designated teachers just for that, and a much smaller percentage.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Unless there's anything else that's relevant to the recommendations, if you have more details, maybe shoot them through emails if things come up as you're thinking this through.
I'm sorry.
Please.
I just have a quick question. There'll be an opportunity for parents to, make the selection again. We are not putting any limits or limits on that. Anybody could choose to go to
Correct.
begin a hybrid. Okay, we don't, okay.
Right. There are
During the
other
last
districts that
selection?
put
During
on
the
a wait
last
list,
selection.
but we are not doing that. Right.
So,
Okay, can I ask a question, Lori?
oh, right.
Oh, sure.
I remember you, Mr. Bauman. Yes, you're here virtually. Yes, of
Thank
course
you.
you can.
I like the options that we hear tonight. There's some good movement forward. And as I look through the recommendation to move forward at junior high and high school, does that recommendation come strictly from a administrative recommendation, or is there a building administration and or any committee work that comes with that recommendation as well?
Yes, we put together committees of teachers and administrators at all the different levels and the special education programs as well, and took their information. The pros and cons that are listed on those slides are statements and pros and cons from that committee work that, again, was teachers and administrators.
Okay, and is this an ongoing, as we're talking about next year options and what we've been moving through, is this an ongoing committee, or is this just been a committee based on a questionnaire? And would you entertain having a committee moving forward so that way, depending on, or to have a game plan for the fall? That way we're not going through, or, well, I can't say we, the board doesn't have to go through these types of motions multiple times. And as we go through the phases, the district's going to be able to say, okay, if there are no changes, we know how we're entering the fall and what the metrics are going to be moving forward without having to go through these types of plannings every 2.5 to 3 months.
So the committees were, we met virtually and, talked through the different options there with the pros and cons. We've already been talking about what would committee, but it's probably committees because elementary and secondary tend to have very different outlooks and needs. But yes, that's part of the work that needs to happen soon, not only for what would remote look like or what might different scenarios, but even if we are all back in person, what are the different changes that need to be made? Some of the things that we've learned that we might want to duplicate about Google Classroom and other pieces, but also how do we need to change our instruction and our practices. One of the things that I'm really interested in pursuing at the elementary level is 6 weeks early on of intensive interventions where we divide up the school and really work solidly to shore up those pieces and then begin our regular MTSS process and what that would look like. And utilize all hands on deck to make sure that our students are getting their early literacy and early numeracy pieces. We're also, as we're saying, building the summer school bridge to try to compensate for some of the school loss that has happened there. But you are exactly right that committee work needs to start in the next couple of weeks to get all of this going for the fall.
Okay. I look forward to it. I just hope we don't hear tomorrow that 3:05 to end the junior high day. That's the first we've ever heard of it. We can't do that. We weren't asked about it. I hope we don't run into that as we have gone through with some of these last phases we've talked about. So I look forward to our vote next board meeting.
Okay, so as we've discussed on March 1st, this will be on as an action item, either to vote yes or no to accept the recommendations of the administration on what a phase 3 would look like to begin April 7th. Thank you. And I know that none of these plans, and I think every board member here could probably echo the same, saying that we know that none of these plans are made by one person or by 2 people or by the 10 people in this room, but that hopefully we really are listening to, you know, our staff that are putting these actions into action. And that we are able to do the best we can for the kids to get them what we need to have them know. Moving on to action items, item 8.1, board policies. Any questions?
I had what I hope is a quick question, and maybe I'm just not reading it right. I think it's the second part of that. So we kind of used to have a policy that any board member could request an item to be added to a future agenda, and obviously sometimes you need more than a few days to prepare the information for that. I guess as I'm reading the changes now, it looks like we're saying, no, that's no longer the case. It is the decision of the then board president to decide to add an item, and I'm asking why we're making that change.
I thought we changed that so that anybody could ask to have it put on.
Anyone could ask an addition or a withdrawal rather
Right.
than just add addition. That you can also add a withdrawal. It actually broadens it. It just doesn't put the,
But isn't that specific to addition or removing from consent?
oh yes, that's from consent.
Do you want to just get rid of consent and just say the agenda?
Brent, I think you're talking about the second paragraph.
Yeah, so.
Oh, I see, the blue paragraph?
Yeah.
The blue one, okay.
I believe this was suggested by press, but there's absolutely no legal reason to even make this change. I mean, you could certainly retain the original language.
Because I think my concern there is while, you know, the board president obviously is capable of making some decisions. I think there's been frustration in the past by other board members at other times. And I'm not speaking about you, Lori. I just think there's been frustration from other board members and feeling like they weren't able to get a topic added and they weren't given a reason why, and they felt like they were being roadblocked. And I think it would be better if there's open conversation and there isn't a hard policy as to only one person being able to make the decision on what topics are added to meetings.
So I think that that's the intention, that's certainly how we operate. It says in the blue, it looks like everything was pulled out except added in was that any board member may submit suggested agenda items to the board president for his or her consideration. Prior to that, it had said, will be added on the agenda if received 96 hours before. If received less than 96 hours before the scheduled meeting, they will be placed on the next agenda. I don't know that we've run up against that in reality.
We haven't lately, but it has happened before.
I believe you, and you can't predict what can happen in the past or in the future.
What if we just got rid of it on the first paragraph, consent?
Yeah,
So
I
any
think
board
that
member-
really speaks to this. I think that the time limit was probably, the 96 hours probably coincides with the length of time needed before an agenda must be made public prior to a meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, because it has to be posted at least 48 hours, so that would give you the additional time to make, determine if it can or should be on and what documentation needs to be added.
I could pull it, take it back if you want.
I mean, what was the committee's thoughts on this when you had this in policy committee?
Anybody could be able to suggest an item
Yeah.
to a board member. So if on that first paragraph, in the red, if it just said any board member may request the addition or withdrawal of any item on the agenda, get rid of the word consent, could we just do that?
Well, I think what Brent is saying, what he likes is, and please correct me if I'm understanding this wrong, is that you like the specificity of it will be added, rather than anyone can suggest it. Is that correct?
Yeah, to me, I think that we're proposing a change here that puts potentially too much power in the board president to be able to reject any and all suggestions. And while I'm not at all suggesting that that would happen, it's happened in the past with other board presidents.
Any other thoughts on this before I jump in again?
My only thought would be, do we need to take it back and not vote on that right now?
That's kind of what I'm thinking. I'd like to have some more discussion around that concept. And the 96 hours, I don't know at what year that was added as a time frame, but I don't know if that's different now, that you need like a week notice and else it'll be on the next agenda. I don't know if that needs to be addressed, but it probably should be discussed. I think the one thing that's added on here, I think I do actually want to keep in that blue section, is where it says the board will take final action only on items contained in the posted agenda. Items not on the agenda may still be discussed. So the final action, Maureen, I think that's the thing that we've actually asked you several times recently this year, on if we can add an item for action, and we can't.
Correct.
So I do feel that that piece should be added in to the policy, but for the other part, I'm not sure if that has to be remaining at the 96, and I'd like to hear some more information about that.
Well, we've already taken it back twice. I
Oh.
think the intent was just so that a board member, any board member could get an item on the agenda. That was the intent.
Okay, and now that, thank you for highlighting that last sentence there, because now that, to me, seems awkward. I understand the goal here is we're trying to say that we're only going to take final action on items contained in the agenda, but I think we have a separate policy that says something slightly different, if I'm not mistaken, that talks about how we can only take action on items at a meeting after an item has been brought as a informational item. And I don't want us to be in conflict.
So we'll take it back. One more time.
Time's the charm.
Maureen, am I remembering that correctly?
Yep.
You are, and that's just, again, that's a practice that this board has, that's not legally required, but you have that it comes for information and then typically action item at a separate meeting, and that is in here somewhere. On On the 96 hours, that's really just the double the 48. So you have to have it posted 48 hours before the meeting, and it was just suggesting anyone who wants something on there, let whoever has to know 48 hours in advance of that. That's what that was for. And then the Brent to this one, this is just merely reaffirming under the Open Meetings Act, you can only take final action on an item that was already listed on the agenda. You can discuss other items, you just can't take action on something that wasn't there.
So then on that, could we reference and point to, because I know we have a policy on it, reference to the policy that says that this board must place items for informational items, a meeting prior to them being taken, before action is taken.
I don't know if I'd want to go that far, because once in a while, as we've seen, things come up with date deadlines that there was no reasonable way to be aware of, that it would require calling an extra meeting. And sometimes that may not,
Okay, well, so-
time frame wise, work.
So let me make two quick comments here. So first of all, it is a policy. So the board can at any time
Yeah.
take a vote to waive the policy because of XYZ and vote on something that evening. The reason why the board had in the past worked on this information before action is to give the public ample opportunity to be made aware of items that we would be taking action on and potentially offering input or consultation. So I hear you, but I think that because it's not a state requirement, it's our requirement that in those cases where we have to take immediate action because of posing deadlines, that we can, just take a vote to waive the policy for that one item if it needs to happen.
All right, would you like to make the motion to remove this policy number from an action item?
I'd like to make a motion to table policy 2:220 and have policy committee review the two items discussed.
Brent, excuse me, I'm going to suggest you amend that. It's been back to the committee twice.
Okay.
I think you need to have that conversation here at this board level. So table it to be added to an upcoming board, because it may come back a third time with things you all don't agree with.
Right, so maybe amend it to be added to information at the March 15th meeting.
Okay, so let me restate my motion. I make a motion to withdraw policy 2:220, to have the items discussed tonight revised and brought back to the board at our next meeting for information.
Second.
There was a second. I think it was Ally.
I got it.
Okay.
Second.
Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson?
Aye.
Mrs. Croner?
Aye.
Mrs. Moyer?
Aye.
Mr. Baumann?
Aye.
Mr. Lightfoot?
Aye.
Ms. Morgan?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Can I have a motion for the amended 8.1, please?
I make a motion to approve the following board policies. Section 6, instruction 6:280, 6:310, Section 7 under students, 7:345, 7:360, Section 8, community relations, 8:10, 8:80, and 8:110.
Second.
Mrs. Swanson?
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Morgan?
Aye.
Mrs. Croner?
Aye.
Mr. Baumann?
Aye.
Mrs. Moyer?
Aye.
Mr. Lightfoot?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 8.2. Can I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the mowing bid as presented.
Second.
Mrs. Croner,
Aye.
Mr. Lightfoot,
Aye.
Mrs. Moyer,
Aye.
Ms. Morgan,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
No.
Mrs. Doyle,
No.
Mr. Baumann,
Aye.
Motion passes 5-2. Item 8.3.
I make a motion to approve the custodial chemical supplies bid as presented.
Second.
Ms. Morgan,
Aye.
Mrs. Croner,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mr. Baumann,
Aye.
Mr. Lightfoot,
Aye.
Mrs. Moyer.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 8.4.
I make a motion to approve the personnel report as presented.
Second.
Mr. Lightfoot,
Aye.
Ms. Morgan,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mr. Baumann,
Aye.
Mrs. Moyer,
Aye.
Mrs. Croner.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?